Hello, and thank you for viewing this presentation of the Eastlake Streetscape Conceptual Plan Community Open House number 3. The project we are presenting today is a next step action recommended in the 2017 Eastlake Sub-Area Plan. It's led by the City of Thornton team, including Glenda Lannis from Planning and Kent Mormon from Transportation. The consultant team is led by Livable City Studio, including Todd Wanskowski and myself, Matt Schalaker. The agenda for today is clear. It is a quick welcome, a quick overview of the project schedule and where we're at, a review of the preferred alternatives, as well as wayfinding and signage, and then questions and discussions and next steps. For this meeting, the questions and discussions that were held at the original live meeting on July 25th are summarized and available on the City of Thornton website. The purpose of this meeting is to review the proposed streetscape concept design for First Street, Lake Avenue, and York Street, as well as the signage and wayfinding concepts. Your comments that you can make through the website will be incorporated into the final report and influence the final conceptual designs, phasing, and implementation. A brief overview of the project for those who have not seen this previously. The goal of this project is to develop streetscape plans, conceptual plans, for Lake Avenue, the east side of First Street, and York Street from 124th Avenue to Birch Street. These plans, as I said, will be conceptual level, and costs will be prepared to inform future implementation projects. I want to be clear, no funding has been set aside for the implementation of these projects as of yet. Conceptual level plans components will include cross sections describing ADA compliant sidewalks, traffic lanes, and bike lanes, as well as parking configuration. In addition, they include landscaping and identification of opportunities for placemaking, amenities, and public art. Lastly, and the next step will be implementation tools and strategies to construct or phase the construction of the streets. We are here in the Community Open House number 3 in Orange. The project began in the summer of 2021, beginning with existing conditions and then conceptual streetscapes alternatives. The next steps prior to or after today's meetings are to study phasing and implementation and then issue the final report. As I mentioned, the project started with outreach and conversations with residents and property owners in the neighborhood last summer in 2021. Through that process, a vision statement was created. The vision statement you see on the screen emphasizes the priorities we heard from the community, including comfortable pedestrian and bike spaces, and in particular, in Orange, protecting the unique character and livability of Eastlake. Through that process and the existing conditions analysis, we identified the potential role of each street in the neighborhood. First Street in green really becomes or is the front door to the neighborhood, primarily from 124th Avenue, as well as the light rail station. Its functions are business access and function to accommodate the businesses along the east side, comfortable pedestrian and bike connections to Lake Avenue, trails to the north and south, and of course the end-line station, and then identity and gateway into the Eastlake neighborhood, given its first impressions and front door. Lake Avenue has historically always been Eastlake's main street, and we foresee that role continuing into the future. That means business access and function are key, but as well, comfortable pedestrian and bike experience. And last but not least, York Street in the orange on the east really is a neighborhood link between 124th Avenue, the Eastlake neighborhood, and the surrounding neighborhoods. Its key roles, we believe, are comfortable pedestrian and bike connections from Lake Avenue down north and south to the post office and other places, north to the other neighborhoods, and as well as identity and gateway into the original Eastlake neighborhood. We thought a quick review of the existing conditions and opportunities would be valuable before reviewing the alternatives. For First and York Street, the primary conclusion from the existing conditions analysis is that the roadways are too wide. This encourages speeding and limits space and comfortable use for pedestrians or bike users. The key opportunity for these two streets is to narrow the lanes, which will slow traffic and then create space for pedestrian and bikes, as well as other amenities, including landscape. On Lake Avenue, the street isn't overly wide. There is limited opportunity to narrow it, but the key opportunities there are to accommodate pedestrians and bikes and resolve some of the grading challenges that create access challenges. Previously, in community meeting number 2, we reviewed 2 alternatives for each street and then gathered community feedback through discussion in the meeting, live surveys, and subsequent online surveys. Our goal for today in this next part is to review these alternatives, the survey results, and then the development of the preferred alternative for each street. So we'll start with First Street. 2 alternatives were presented for First Street, which I'll review quickly here. Alternative 1 was a complete street. What that means is it includes safe, comfortable elements for each type of user, pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicles, and of course parking, as well as amenity spaces for them. So you can see in alternative 1 here on the left, in the light blue, painted bike lanes, in the center 2 10-foot traffic lanes, and in the darker blue, ADA accessible sidewalks, and then in green, landscape and new landscape and space for amenities and street trees. You can see on the right side there as well some parallel parking provided on the east side. Alternative 2, called Flexible East Side, really emphasizes accommodating the function and access for the existing businesses on the east side of First Lane. So the roadway space is shifted as far west as possible and made as narrow as possible to create additional space on the east side to accommodate a new sidewalk, the green amenity zones and street tree areas, but also parallel or angled parking similar to the existing function and existing layout of the street. This slide summarizes the community feedback we received. The text is small, so I'll read it. We asked for each alternative 2 questions. The first question, of the concepts presented for First Street, what elements are most appealing to you to retain and enhance Eastlake's character? As you can see in the graph below, the primary responses were narrower roadway and traffic calming with 42% of the vote, and increased trees and green areas with 67% of votes. So those are the priorities. The second question, of the 2 alternatives presented for First Street, do you have a preference? You can see a preference from the survey for alternative 2. So based on that and additional review with the city of Thornton and other stakeholders, alternative 2 was selected as the preferred alternative. So you can see the key features in there, like as I mentioned before, the travel lanes shifted to the west curve to accommodate various organizations of parking along the east side, expanded pedestrian and amenity green spaces on the east side, and then in the blue, the shared street, in order to reduce the width of the lanes and create space on the east side. This alternative, the preferred alternative, is proposing a shared street. What that means is a differently textured and surfaced street than a typical street that promotes slower travel, is narrow, and is shared between all users, meaning bikes and cars. The key to that is keeping the speed slow, which we believe we can do. The typical proposed sections for these streets, for the street, you can see above. On the top section, you can see the existing sidewalk on the left side, the west side, which has already been constructed and is not changing. And then the hatched area, 2 shared lanes, each 10 feet wide. So a total of 20 feet of shared lanes between vehicles and bicycles. And then where diagonal parking currently exists or is desired in the future, you can see the space to accommodate that, as well as a small buffer, and then a new sidewalk in the blue on the east side. The lower section shows a portion of the street where there's angled parking on the east side and angled parking on the west. For those of you that know the neighborhood, you know the western curb sort of swings in and creates zones of parallel parking on the west side. So you can see the existing sidewalk on the west, that existing parallel parking on the west, two, again, in hatched, two 10-foot lanes, shared lanes, and then the parallel parking on the east side with a small buffer before a wide landscaped area that can accommodate new trees, amenities for adjacent businesses, or drainage to solve some of the drainage problems for the homes on the east side. And then again, the blue area is a new sidewalk. This view is a picture of the existing condition at First Street and the intersection with Lake Avenue looking south. And this, standing in the same spot, is just a quick visualization showing that intersection in the proposed concept. So you can see the textured roadway in brick extending further down the street, and the distance, or what the gray asphalt in the distance could become, will be determined through the concept design and pricing. But that narrowed space with the textured brick paving will slow travelers down and identify it as a shared space. You can see the angled parking, and as it currently exists in front of the bar, as well as some landscape and new sidewalks along the east side of the street on the left side of this image. Moving on to Lake Avenue now. Again, two alternatives were studied for Lake Avenue. The key existing condition and challenge on Lake Avenue is grading. For those who have been out there or seen the previous presentations, we know that there are multiple areas along Lake Avenue between First Street all the way down to York Street, where the businesses, the front doors of buildings, are up to 1.5 or even 2 feet higher than the roadway itself, which creates access challenges that need to be resolved in a new concept. So how we resolve that concept and then also balance the competing needs for parking for businesses, pedestrian spaces and amenity spaces, as well as bike circulation, become the challenge on the street. So the first alternative we call balance, and what that means is we are balancing parking in the amenity zone based on the grading. So there is parallel parking and amenity zone provided where there is no grading issue, where as you can see on the right side of the image there, you could open a door and access that green amenity zone comfortably, and then access the blue sidewalk without any steps or vertical change. On the left side of the view, parking or amenity zone is provided where grading challenges exist, because in order to have the parking, we need to open a door into a flat space. So we have a space there, and then a wall or steps accessing the blue sidewalk areas. Alternative 2 proposes to shift the lane, so shift the roadway a little bit to the side within the public right-of-way space. And also, like First Street, create a shared street that accommodates vehicles and bicycles. The shifted space, by moving the street a little bit to the side, it creates additional space on the wider side, as you can see in the view here, that allows us to accommodate head-in or angled parking, as well as possibly using those spaces for amenities for adjacent businesses. Again, those two alternatives were presented to the public in Community Open House 2, and the survey results are here. Of the concepts presented for Lake Avenue, what elements are most appealing? You can see in the dark blue and light blue, expanding amenity areas and seating areas was a high response with 51%. And again, increased trees and green areas was the highest response with 58%. So those two were clearly the most appealing elements of these alternatives. Second was narrower roadway and traffic calming. You'll note that parking for businesses is one of the lower responses. We understand, and the city understand, that may reflect the number of residents versus the number of business owners responding to the survey. So we do acknowledge that parking for businesses is still important. Of the two alternatives presented for Lake Avenue, do you have a preference? You can see here that there was a slight preference for option 2. So with that knowledge, again, option 2 has become the preferred alternatives. You can see the key features of this street, shifting the travel lanes, as I mentioned, to create space for angled or head-in parking on the wider side of the street, but this still creates an expanded pedestrian and amenity and green spaces on the narrower side of the street in the left side of this view. So we still have a 6-foot wide sidewalk, as well as in green there, an amenity zone that is accessible and usable for adjacent businesses or the public for seating. And then you can see this, the wall or steps to resolve the grading challenges where those exist. The other key features here is a narrow shared street for pedestrian, bikes, and cars. And so we believe this alternative meets those key neighborhood goals, supports the local businesses, increases pedestrian and bike comfort, and adds green spaces and trees, and really creates a unique space and street within the neighborhood. Again, here's an existing view of Lake Avenue, looking west towards First Street and the pavilion at the N line station. And the concept in this same spot would look like this. So you can see the shared roadway with the car in it there, all in brick or some other enhanced texture. And then you can see on the left side, the slight wall to resolve the grading challenges emerging and the spaces above that with the sidewalk. And again, the same thing on the right. And you can see a key feature of this about in the middle of the image where the roadway curve slightly shifts to the left. So that is a key design feature that allows us to locate the parking, the head-in parking in the distance where the grading best accommodates and where the adjacent uses best require it, but also will serve to additionally slow down vehicles and cars because they have to navigate that slight curve. And last but not least, York Street. Again, 2 alternatives were studied for York Street. The first one we called bike lanes, and before I get into it, I'll identify several common features to both, and then we can discuss the 2 things that are different in each alternative. So in both options for York Street, there is the wide roadway has been narrowed to 2 lanes. So you see 2 10-foot lanes there in gray, the bus and the car in them. A new sidewalk and amenity zone have been added to the west side of York Street, where none exists now. So you can see the light blue on the west side sidewalk in the green area for the amenity zone with the trees in it. Not only does that improve the pedestrian experience and circulation, but it also will help us improve the drainage challenge for properties to the west by being able to have more vertical change at the driveway and containing the drainage, not allowing it to spill over down the driveways into those properties. The key differences between the alternatives we'll go through now. So alternative 1, bike lanes, you can see there are painted one-way bike lanes on either side of the street. And then an additional amenity zone is added on the east side adjacent to the existing sidewalk. Option 2, there's a 2-way bike lane. So you can see a 2-way bike lane on the east side of the street, protected and separated from the traffic by a buffer space, and then you can see the white posts. Those could be the white posts you often see these days, or planters or other features to separate and physically protect the bike lane. And again, the sidewalk and amenity zone are added on the west, but no additional amenity zone is added on the east side. The community feedback for these 2 alternatives of the concepts presented for York Street, what elements are most appealing? You can see two elements that were tied with 52% of the vote, expanding trees and green areas and improving safety at intersections. And then an additional tie vote between, do you prefer bike lanes on both sides of the street or the 2-way bike lane? And then of the preferred alternatives, basically it is also very close. Option 2 is slightly ahead by 1 vote. So based on this feedback and discussion internally with the city and stakeholders, alternative 2 was selected as the preferred alternative. This is for a couple key reasons. 1, alternative 2, by locating the bike lane two-way bike lane on the east side of the roadway. We reduced the driveway conflicts and increases the comfort and safety of for the bikers. On the east side, there are, I believe, 3 intersections between 124th Avenue and 128th Avenue. On the west side, there are those same 3 intersections, as well as several driveways. So locating the bike lanes on the east greatly reduces those conflicts and increases the comfort. It also allows that bike lane to seamlessly connect to multi-use trails to the north that lead to Eastlake Lake Park and other open spaces in the community. So we believe this option not only increases safety and comfort for the cyclist, but it meets those key neighborhood goals, supporting local businesses, increasing bike and pedestrian comfort, adds green spaces and trees with the new tree lawn on the west side, and addresses the drainage challenges. Again, look, the existing condition at York Street, here we are standing in the middle of the street looking south, and you can see Lake Avenue to your right. This new concept would look like this. Again, you can see in the green on the left side, the two-way bike lane with the posts and the curb protecting it. 2 travel lanes on the right side there, and then to the far right of the street, a new sidewalk and new green spaces with trees. You also see here at the intersection with Lake Avenue, a new gateway feature proposed at the intersection with Lake as you enter Lake Avenue, moving into the main street of Eastlake. We wanted to step back and look at all 3 streets and the parking summary compared to the 2017 sub-area plan and what is provided in these concepts. We know parking, as always, is a key issue for businesses, but also for the quality of life of residents in the neighborhood, and to ensure people are not utilizing 2nd Street. So the 2017 sub-area plan included a parking study that estimated the long-term need for parking in the neighborhood at 400 parking spaces. The existing streets, as you can see here tallied on the left, 1st Street, Lake Avenue, York Street, and 124th Avenue. You can see there is a total of 126 on-street parking spaces. You can see some of those are estimated for, as in York Street, the sub-area plan parking study estimated 60 to 85 spaces on York. And then 124th Avenue, the 150 off-street spaces listed there is the parking lot. It is not parking on the street. It is the new parking lot that has been constructed by the city, which has 150 spaces now, but can be expanded to 250. The potential on these streets in these concepts, you can see on the right-hand side. So 1st Street, by shifting and accommodating parking on the east side, we've actually increased the number of on-street parking spaces. The off-street parking spaces on 1st Street are the 2 parking lots on the west side of the street that have been constructed by the city. So you can see 62 existing and 62 potential. Lake Avenue, there are currently 35 on-street parking spaces, and the concept shows 27 on-street parking spaces. We acknowledge that as a reduction, but compared to alternative 1, this is alternative 2 has more than alternative 1. And then York Street, again, we have 60 estimated on-street parking spaces, 0 off-street. The potential, we're showing 12 on-street parking spaces. That is due to the existing utilization of parking on York Street. Parking is heavily utilized to the south end at the post office and commercial development, but is not at all used north of that all the way up to Lake Avenue or Burke Street or 128th, due to the fact that we have neighborhoods that are often backing, and so that parking doesn't conveniently access anything. The presence of underutilized parking makes for a wider perception of the street and adds to the speeding challenges. So for the alternatives, we have only located on-street parking on York Street in the south, and there are 12 spaces on the east side of the street. And then again, 124th Avenue is the 150 off-street parking spaces in the parking lot. You can see for a total of 267 off-street spaces in the potential and 76 on-street spaces. With that, I'd like to move to a brief discussion of the signage and wayfinding concepts. The goal of the signage and wayfinding concepts are multiple. One key goal is to identify the street or the neighborhood, but also to direct passengers, people driving, searching for the end line station, and direct them away from the neighborhood to the west side so that they can access parking and not utilize the public parking that's provided in Eastlake, which is intended to be used for residents and business parking only. So there are a number of types of signs on here. We can run through a few of them. Obviously on the left, the identity pylon ID identity signage that at key intersections locations can serve a function of arrival, of placemaking and identity for the neighborhood. It could also, in conjunction with the parking directional or vehicular wayfinding signs a little bit further to the right, direct people to parking or to parking for the RTD station. In addition, you can see the pageantry and banners or plaques and markers on the existing large lights or smaller acorn style pedestrian lights, as well as pedestrian wayfinding signs and post-mounted interpretive signs. The idea behind these is to be able to temporarily or permanently identify events happening in the neighborhood, but also tell the unique story and the history of Eastlake throughout the streetscapes. In addition, as I mentioned previously, a gateway element is proposed at Lake Avenue at the intersection with York Street. The design of this, the concept of this, is to mimic somewhat the pavilion that's already been constructed at Lake Street or Lake Avenue and First Street adjacent to the transit station. But bring that out to the intersection, create a new gateway into Lake Avenue, celebrating the neighborhood and sort of livening the main street, as you can see in the example pictures on the right. As I said before, questions and discussion. There was lively questions and discussion during the public meeting on July 25th. That discussion is summarized and downloadable on the City of Thornton's website. The next steps for the project will include the further development of the preferred alternatives and the concept design, as well as prioritizing each street and elements of the street for implementation and phasing. The city does not expect to be able to build all of these streets at one time, and they will be built through possibly in conjunction with private development, but also public grants and implemented in a phased manner. So the city and project team will be working through those challenges and those questions, and including that in the final report that will be delivered in August or September for review. And with that, the last thing is to thank you for your time and your interest in the project and viewing this presentation. Please find the area on the website where you can add comments, and those will be incorporated into the final concept design, the implementation and phasing, and of course, the final report. Thank you again.